After the end of World War I, America's economy and spirits were booming. The era of the 1920s was a time full of music, joy, and rebellion. During this time period, traditions were broken and people began to live in the moment. People flocked to jazz clubs in Harlem, New York, to witness for themselves what the Harlem Renaissance was truly about. This cultural movement showcased the talents that African Americans possessed. The jazz clubs, jazz musicians, and authors are what made the time period of the 1920s memorable.
Stop 1. The Apollo Theater.
The Apollo Theater was designed by George Keister and first owned by Sidney Cohen. In 1914, Benjamin Herdig and Harry Seaman acquired a lease on the building and decided to call it Herdig's and Seaman's New Burlesque Theater. In 1933, Fiorello LaGuardia, who was the future mayor of New York City, began a campaign against burlesque, which caused Herdig's and Seaman's to close down. In 1934, Cohen reopened the building as the 125th Street Apollo Theater, and he changed the burlesque shows to variety shows instead. In 1934, Ralph Cooper, an actor and a producer at the time, began Wednesday Amateur Night at the theater. This became a huge showcase for young and talented performers like 15-year-old Ella Fitzgerald, who was one of the first Amateur Night winners. Since its opening, the Apollo Theater has not only launched careers of people like Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, and James Brown, but it has also hosted appearances by Billie Holiday, Sammy Davis Jr., Sidney Poitier, Miles Davis, Gladys Knight, Jimi Hendrix, Marvin Gaye, Bill Crosby, Sister Sledge, Bob Marley, Prince, Tony Bennett, and even John Lennon and Yoko Ono. The Apollo Theater had a large impact in the supporting of the Harlem Renaissance. When the theater began allowing a black audience and having a colored revenue, this theater was the place to be in midst of the cultural explosion. Cohen redirected the attention of the theater to the growing African American community that was sprawling in Harlem. By 1937, the Apollo Theater was the largest employer of black theatrical workers in the country. The Apollo Theater received state and city landmark status in 1983, and today the Apollo is under the guidance of a board of directors. Also, the Apollo has been listed on the National Register of Historic Places. This theater has celebrated its 75th anniversary in the 2009-2010 season and still continues to present concerts, performing arts, education, and community outreach programs.
Stop 2. The Audubon Ballroom.
Located at 3940 Broadway between 165th and 166th Street, opened in 1912 by William Fox as the Audubon Ballroom. The ballroom was designed by Thomas W. Lamb, and the interior combines mythological symbols and theatrical elements. In the ballroom, there were box seats with fabric curtains and bentwood chairs. A satyr's head crowned each box that had been flanked by maidens in delicate dresses. The ballroom seats 2,368 people and was originally known as the William Fox Audubon, then the Beverly Hills, then the San Juan, and lastly the Audubon Ballroom. Upstairs, the ballroom was used for social occasions and special events. This had a dance floor, tables, booths, and a stage for entertainment.
A new king and queen of Harlem would be crowned, and jazz greats such as Arthur Zutty Singleton and Henry Red Allen, although the most important event to take place was the shooting of Malcolm X, a popular leader of a militant black nationalist movement. On February 21, 1965, he was shot to death in a rally at the Audubon by Thomas Hagen. A feud had broken out between the extremist black Muslim group and the militant black movement. Then shots were fired and Malcolm X was killed. The police thought the shooting had been a conspiracy, with as many as 5 people involved. To this day, the Audubon Ballroom is known well for this event.
The Audubon was the site of early efforts to organize the transit system for New York workers, or the Interborough Rapid Transit System. The Transport Workers Union was the first successful industrial labor union of its kind, and the Audubon was a regular meeting place for the newly created union. The reason the meeting place was moved was because membership grew to 30,000 members, and thus it was moved to West 64th Street in 1937. The Audubon Ballroom was also a popular social place to showcase the latest jazz and entertainment through the Harlem Renaissance. It was important to the uprise.
Today, the Audubon Ballroom stands at the same spot at 3940 Broadway and is used for the Harlem Heights Society and the future home to the Malcolm X Museum. The Harlem Heights Society researches and records the history of Upper Manhattan, such as the Harlem Renaissance. It also celebrates and records modern places like restaurants and halls that show the cultures of the people who live in Upper Manhattan. The Society works with the neighboring Columbia University and Hispanic Society of America for new projects. These projects are used to gain the interest in Upper Manhattan neighborhoods.
Stop 3. Minton's Playhouse.
Minton's Playhouse was another famous jazz nightclub during the Harlem Renaissance. It was founded by saxophonist Henry Minton in 1938 on the first floor of the Cecil Hotel at 210 West 118th Street. Minton's Playhouse is famous for its role in the development of modern jazz, also known as bebop, where in the early 1940s, Thelonious Monk, Kenny Clarke, Charlie Christian, Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie played there. Henry was known well in Harlem for being the first black delegate to the American Federation of Musicians Local 802. Before founding Minton's, he was the owner of the Rhythm Club in the early 1930s, which also was located in Harlem. Minton was aware of the artistic and economic need for jazz music throughout this era, which made him a great man to open these types of clubs. Minton hosted frequent jam sessions where his hired band would play, which played a key role in the development of bebop. During this time period, people would be fined for hosting and being a part of these jam sessions, which took place at other clubs as well, but Minton's connections to the union prevented this from happening at his club. This also played another key role in why the Playhouse was such a big hit. After Henry Minton opened the club, he hired Teddy Hill. Hill put together the house band, which included Thelonious Monk on piano, Joe Guy on trumpet, Nick Fenton on bass, and Kenny Clarke on drums. After the jazz music and newly developed bebop started to become too mainstream, the Playhouse started to decline in business, yet it wasn't until 1974 where it closed its doors. After being closed for more than 30 years, the newly remodeled club reopened its doors on May 19, 2006, under the name Uptown Lounge at Minton's Playhouse. Unfortunately, the reopened club was closed again in 2010. This club was just as influential as many of the other jazz nightclubs during this time period in Harlem. However, Minton's business background led him to be more generous with who he allowed to play at the club, which created a bigger popularity, which for several musicians, they could play freely whenever without the worry of getting caught by other delegates tied to the union. Minton's Playhouse is known well for its contributions to jazz music and bebop in the Harlem Renaissance.
Stop 4. The Cotton Club.
The Cotton Club on Lenox Avenue opened in 1920 as the Club Deluxe. In 1922, the name was changed to the Cotton Club. It is a famous Harlem nightclub that was opened during the Prohibition that hosted many entertainers such as Duke Ellington, Fletcher Henderson, Adelaide Hall, Count Basie, Basie Smith, Cab Calloway, and Ella Fitzgerald. Oddly, it generally denied admission to African Americans, even though most of the performers were African American. The club gave Duke Ellington national exposure through its radio broadcast and provided this service to many other performers.
Stop 5. Bill's Place.
Bill's Place was founded in 1920 by the Harlem native and legendary saxophonist Bill Saxton.
Bill's Place was styled as a popular jazz joint. It was an important musical venue during the Harlem Renaissance.
Some important people that played here was Billie Holiday, and this was where he was founded. And then Willie the Lion Smith also played here with Bill Saxton and his band.
Music was played every Friday night at Bill's Place, and with the growing interest in jazz from the white community, Bill's Place was the place to be.
Today it serves as a restaurant that is kid-friendly, and you can pretty much just come here, get a nice bite to eat, and then go out to one of the other clubs.
Bill's Place is still playing jazz music today, and with its reputation and contributions to the Harlem Renaissance, its name will go down in history.
Stop 6. St. Nick's Jazz Pub.
The St. Nick's Jazz Pub is located in Harlem's Sugar Hill section. It is the oldest continually operating jazz club in Harlem. The pub was open every day of the week except for Tuesday, starting at 9:30 p.m. In 1940, it was owned by Duke Ellington's piano player, Lucky Roberts. Famous jazz musicians such as Art Tatum, Donald the Jersey Rocket Lambert, and Marlo Morris play there during that time period.
Stop 7. The Lenox Lounge.
The Lenox Lounge is also located in Harlem, New York. Many famous artists such as Billie Holiday, Miles Davis, and John Coltrane started performing there. Also, they featured many writers such as James Baldwin and Langston Hughes. This establishment was built in 1939 and was originally known as the Zebra Room. Later, the name was changed to the Lenox Lounge. After the original Lenox Lounge closed, someone opened a refurbished version down the street in New York.
Billie Holiday was originally born with the name Eleanor Flagon in Baltimore, Maryland, but she later changed her name to Billie Holiday. She lived a hard life as her father had left when she was younger, and her mom was never really around due to her transportation job. A troubled child, Billie skipped school frequently and thus had to go to reform school at the age of 10. By the age of 11, Billie had dropped out, moved to Harlem, and became a prostitute with her mother. Finally, she started working and singing in clubs and became famous and extremely popular with both whites and blacks. It was unusual and illegal for a while for blacks to perform in white nightclubs, but as Billie worked at one, she had the opportunity to perform and was discovered in 1933 by John Hammond. She began to work with Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Southern tree.
Billie was famous for several songs such as Strange Fruit, God Bless the Child, Easy Living, and many more. They all incorporated symbols or lines relating to the discrimination and inferiority she and others experienced compared to whites. For example, in Strange Fruit, Billie sings about the horrible lynching that is going on in the South, as heard as in her lyrics, pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scene of magnolias sweet and fresh, then the sudden smell of burning flesh.
Billie Holiday's impact on Harlem was immense. She was able to express the truth about segregation, racism, and what was actually happening in the South. She found that singing these types of songs were her way to vent her anger from being discriminated against. Billie was putting an end to stereotypes and emphasized her power by being the first black woman to perform with a white orchestra.
Sweet and fresh, then the sudden smell.
Billie Holiday died in 1959 due to her drug abuse. She had begun to use heroin and opium at the height of her career, in addition to cocaine, alcoholism, marijuana, and cigarettes. She sang until she died, and despite her drug problems, she...
Fats Waller was born May 21, 1904, with the name Thomas Waller, and his parents had a big influence on him. His dad was a preacher, and his mom was an organ player and pianist. He started playing the organ when he was 6 years old in his father's church. When Waller was introduced to a stride pianist named James Johnson, he decided that that's what he wanted to do, and he started performing professionally when he was 15. Fats wrote the score for a play called Hot Chocolates in 1929, which included his most famous song, Ain't Misbehavin'. He produced some of the most famous hits in that time with Victor Records, including The Joint is Jumpin' and Your Feet's Too Big. Waller changed the way most Harlem pianists played. He made a huge influence on the swing era and was one of the first pianists of his time to really put on a show while playing. He was very outgoing, and pianists like Count Basie followed in his footsteps. He actually taught Count Basie for a while. Fats Waller introduced a fun style of playing piano, while playing what is called stride piano, where you jump chords with your hands, and that style is still very much used today in jazz. Fats Waller is where it all started, and his music and style are used to this day.